Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the June 1st, 2016 meeting of the Frederick County Planning Commission. And would you join us in a moment of silence, please? Thank you. Before we adopt the agenda, we'd like to welcome Bill Klein of the Stonewall District, and we look forward to working with you. Okay, we need to adopt the agenda, which has got no changes to it.
Madam Chair, I move for adoption.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Thank you. We've got minutes of May the 4th.
Move for approval of the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Committee reports, there are some. Let's see here. The comprehensive CPPC met on the 9th. Mr. Marson, you've got a report for us, I think.
Yes, Madam Chairman. We met May the 9th of this year, of course. We discussed the 2035 comprehensive plan update and the third phase of the three phases approach to the update. And the third phase is the communication and public outreach phase. The approach to this was endorsed by the CPPC. It includes for additional public outreach and community meetings. These meetings will be held over the next 2 weeks. The flyer advertising the date and time of these meetings is on that screen right over there. And we at the same time, and so you were emailed, all the members were emailed, and they're available to anybody that would like to have one for these meetings. In addition to that, we coordinated a web-based approach to provide information about the update and another way to provide information to members of that are interested. So it'll be going through our web also. It is the intent of this outreach to get input from the public on the plan in general, key sections of the plan, and the adjustments that have been identified to date by the Blue Ribbon panels. It is also the opportunity to find out about particular issues citizens of the county may have with the update. And I would state that the planning commissioners and the CPPC members have a role in these meetings and are encouraged to attend and participate. And I'd also like to add that to date there's been a tremendous amount of time and effort and work put into this update by the staff, by the CPPC committee, by the Blue Ribbon panels, and many others involved. And there is more work to go, but we feel that we are on the right track and that we're going to come up with a real good 5-year update. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And for the public, we encourage you to participate in these meetings. And you will be able to see the schedule on the county's website as well. So we hope to see you there. Mr. Triplett, the CEA did it meet?
Yes, we did. How about that? First time since last August.
Yes.
So it was just to get reacquainted, and we're going to critique the video that we showed last year.
Yes.
I don't remember the exact date. But anyhow, I would like to, at some point, once we've reviewed it, added to it, maybe a little critiquing in it, to be able to present it at one of our meetings.
That'd be great.
And that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Let's see. Mr. Ambrogi is not here. He did represent us at the Historic Resources Advisory Board, and I'm sorry that we can't hear his report. For transportation, I'm going to ask Mike to speak to us about what has gone on in that arena.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The Transportation Committee had looked at several items, including the Eastern Road Plan, which is a part of the update to the comprehensive plan. In addition, they forwarded a recommendation onto the Board of Supervisors, and I believe Mr. Dunn may mention this here in a moment, about the Oakdale Crossing traffic calming project, and the applicant's residents request that that be moved forward to VDOT.
Great, thank you very much. And let's see,
She's right there. City?
ma'am, are you a new member of the City Planning Commission? Well, come on up, we've got a seat for you. Oh, yes, yes, thank you. I didn't know. Yeah, it's okay. Come on up and have a seat with us, and while you're taking your ease up there, if you'd like to provide a report to us, and I'm assuming, let's see, I did some research, and you're Kat Eaton? Are you Kat Eaton? Thank you. Welcome to the Frederick County Planning Commission.
Well, thank you for the kind welcome.
Yes.
And my name is Kat Eaton. I'm one of the newest Planning Commission members for the City of Winchester. I do have a brief update for you from our May work. The Corridor Enhancement District is being initiated, and what that means, it will move forward to City Council. The focus of that area is Fairmont and Wick, and North Loudon and North Cameron. We've had 1 or 2 public hearings and have had representatives from businesses and residents come out and share some of their concerns and also things that they like about it. And that will all be taken in consideration at the upcoming council meetings as well. One of the other things that we have been working on is a renewal of a CUP for Elms Properties, which is a budget motel on Valley. We have moved that forward as well to City Council. Recommendation is to approve. The other thing that we've been working on is the capital improvement project. We had a presentation and reviewed it, a little bit of discussion. That also has been forwarded to City Council for their review as well and approval.
Good. Thank you. Nice to have you. Thank you very much. Our next person is Board of Supervisors Representative Lane Dunn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On May 25th, the Board of Supervisors unanimously approved the Shawnee Cannering Company's request to rezone 2 acres, 2.1 acres from rural to B2 business general. I think that they will be a good addition to the county, and it was approved unanimously by the board. That's all we did that pertains to
Thank you.
this.
Thank you, sir. This is the time on our agenda when we welcome citizen comments on any subject that is not a public hearing. And seeing no one, we will close the citizen comment portion. Our first item is a public hearing. It's conditional use permit 04-16 for Vicky Nash, which submitted for a cottage occupation nail salon. The property is located at 215 Fruit Orchard Drive in Gore and is identified by property identification number 1722A-19 in the Gainsborough Magisterial District. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Members of the Planning Commission. Again, this property currently is zoned R5, a residential recreational community. The land use is residential, and again, this is for a nail salon cottage occupation. If I could turn your attention to the map on your left, kind of give an outline where this property is located. The property is surrounded by R5 zone property with residential, with the exception of the western property, which is the state of West Virginia. This property is located right on the, obviously, the West Virginia line. The cottage occupations are permitted in the R5 zoning district with an approved conditional use permit. This proposed cottage occupation will take place in the applicant's residence with one room that's set up. I believe in your agenda, there's an outline of what the room that she's going to be using for her nail salon. There'll be no more than 5 customers per day with this conditional use permit, and there will be no employees associated with it at all. Should the planning commission find this use to be appropriate, staff would recommend the following conditions. There is going to be an amendment to the conditions after talking with Ms. Nash, but if I can, Madam Chair, I'm going to go through them.
Sure.
It's a small change that she had requested this, just before the meeting started, so bear with me.
Right.
Number 1, all review agency comments shall be complied with at all times. Number 2, there'll be no signage associated with this conditional use permit. And number 3, her hours of operation are going to be from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. It'll be Monday through Saturday, not Monday through Friday. She would like to have Saturday operation with this. So again, that adjustment will be hours of operation from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Saturdays, not Monday through Fridays, okay? There'll be no more than 5 customers per day, and there'll be no employees permitted other than those residing at the premises, which would be Mrs. Nash. And any expansion or modification of this use will require approval of a new conditional use permit. For the record, Ms. Nash is here to answer any questions you or the board member, planning commissioners may have on this application, and staff is here to answer any questions you may have.
Are there questions, Mr. Chairman?
Madam
Yes.
Chair, the second condition, why no signage?
The applicant did not want did not want signage.
Not even one on a door? Okay. If it's her request.
If you'd like to, come on up. Would you like to?
I live in an HOA.
Ah,
I apologize.
no, I'm sorry.
I live in HOA, and part of the HOA requirements, there's no signage in the yard, and I want to respect that. That's why there's no sign.
Yes, thank you. Are there any other questions that perhaps you'd like to ask the applicant? Any? Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I've got a question about this, the health department thing.
Yes, Madam Chair. I'm going to turn back to the map real quick. As pointed out earlier, the Frederick County Health Department did not comment on this application because the applicant's drain field is in her front yard, which is actually in West Virginia. Staff did talk to, as a courtesy, called the Health Department at Hampshire County to ask if they had any opinion on where the drain field is located. There are already adverse conditions this conditional use could produce. The applicant brought me a piece of paperwork that showed she had a drain field. It was over capacity according to the Hampshire County Sanitation or Health Department. Ergo, that should hopefully answer your question. And our health department, again, can't comment because it's in a different state.
Is that clear
Yeah.
as mud? Yeah. Thank you. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to this conditional use permit? Well, seeing none, we will close the public hearing. Commissioners? Thoughts?
Straightforward.
I have no problem at all with it. I rode up, saw where the house is, so I don't see anything wrong.
Okay, anybody else? This is,
If no one has any discussion about it, then I make the motion to approve conditional use permit 04-16 Vicky Nash Nail Salon.
and the adjustment, and the adjustment.
The Monday through Saturday.
Okay,
Monday
everybody
through
got it?
Saturday.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Moan.
Moan, yes.
Dunlap, yes.
Triplett, yes.
Kenny, yes.
Molden, yes.
Thomas, yes.
Oates, yes.
Klein, yes.
Marston, yes.
And the chair votes yes. This will go to the Board of Supervisors on June the 22nd. Thank you very much. Okay, our next is also a public hearing. It's an ordinance amendment to the Frederick County Code, Chapter 165 zoning, Article 4 agricultural and residential districts, Part 401 RA Rural Areas District, Paragraph 165-401.06 permitted lot sizes. These are revisions to the county zoning ordinance to provide for an allowance to permit divisions from rural preservation lots for public road dedications or utility dedications. And Mrs. Perkins will help us with that.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the commission. This is a request to revise the zoning ordinance to provide an allowance to permit divisions from rural preservation lots for public road dedications or utility dedications. Currently, the ordinance prohibits all future divisions from these rural preservation tracts. The only allowance is if they're going to get larger. They cannot get smaller currently. So staff has prepared the minor revision that's in your agenda to provide that allowance for the boundaries of rural preservation lots to be modified, provided that, first, the future division would only be allowed for the widening of an existing VDOT-owned road, and second, for a public utility dedication. Now, just some of the brief history of where this amendment has been. It went to the DRC at their February meeting. It came before you at your April 6th meeting. The Board of Supervisors held a discussion on April 27th, and they did send it to public hearing. So tonight, we are seeking a recommendation from the Planning Commission to forward to the board on this proposed text amendment. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions of Mrs. Perkins? Any?
Ms. Perkins, I remember at the board meeting, they mentioned, I guess it was asked if a water tower could go on a rural preservation tract. Under our current ordinance, they can put one up right now, it'd just be in an easement, not on an
Correct.
actually dedicated parcel.
Correct.
So as far as the impact of the public utility, no difference other than they don't land
It's just a matter of
outright.
owning it versus not owning it.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to this ordinance amendment? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing. All right, this came out of DRRC.
Madam Chairman, I'd move recommendation of approval for the ordinance change. It is consistent with our comprehensive plan.
Second.
Any other comments? Okay, Mr. Marson.
Marston, yes.
Klein, yes.
Oates, yes.
Thomas, yes.
Molden, yes. Kenny, yes.
Triplett, yes.
Dunlap, yes.
Moan, yes.
And this also will go to the board on June the 22nd. The last two items are information and discussion items, and actually, Mr. Ruddy is going to concentrate first on the conditional use permit discussion that we started at our retreat, and then speak to other parts of the retreat. So,
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. This is a good opportunity as we come out of the retreat to a regular Planning Commission meeting, just to make sure that any comments, questions, concerns, or issues that we talked about during the retreat are addressed to the satisfaction of the Planning Commission. And so we wanted to kind of recognize the conditional use permit discussion and go through a few things with regards to conditional use permits, just to make sure, again, that we're aware and understand generally how we deal with them in Frederick County and those best practices. And then I'll briefly touch on the outline of the retreat in a moment. But starting with the conditional use permits, in general terms, I provided a little outline there that we could use as a discussion point, and then also in the future, just to address some of the things that we talked about at the retreat. And what are some of those best practices that we apply in Frederick County to conditional use permits and their evaluation and the conditions that go on them. First and foremost, and we had a little discussion earlier, and hopefully it could be clearer perhaps in the future, but we want to make sure that all review agency comments are addressed. Now, if there are unique agency comments, then we have the ability to deal specifically with those comments with a condition. Alternately, the county's approach best practice, if you will, has been to make sure that we have a condition that is a catch-all condition stating that all review agency comments shall be addressed at all times. Again, that's our local take on it, and that seems to work pretty well. It's important to recognize that any conditions that are attached to a conditional use permit relate directly or have some relationship to the use that's being proposed with the conditional use permit. Obviously, we have a whole scale of those conditional use permits from a restaurant, country store example, gas station perhaps, to what we saw this evening, which is a cottage occupation tied as an accessory to a residential use. So the scale is quite varied, but it's important to recognize that any conditions relate to that use. And as long as that is met, that the conditions relate to the use, I think we discovered very clearly that most other conditions that we could come up with would be appropriate. Again, the creativity of a conditional use permit gives us the ability to address any conditions that may come up with a particular use, location, site. So again, assuming there's that relationship with the condition, anything that the Planning Commission and ultimately the board would come up with would be appropriate or would be acceptable. And as we heard from Mr. Foote, and that was also reiterated by Mr. Williams, the conditional use permits have the same basis in law evaluation as a rezoning would. And so the importance of the Planning Commission and board's evaluation of them has a great deal of merit in the, I guess, long-standing function of them and the ability of them to meet the test of law, to be appropriate, if you will. Now, the conditional use permit and its associated conditions have predominantly run with the land here in Frederick County. It's important to recognize that years and years ago, we did have timeframes associated with them and tied to particular applicants. But again, in recent times, they've predominantly run with the land. Recognizing, as we did at the retreat, it is okay to include conditions that connect the permit to a particular user, to a particular applicant, or to a specific time frame, again, should the appropriate conditional use permit warrant such an approach. But again, we fall back to Frederick County's best practice, if you will, in recent years, and that has been to limit that alternative approach I mentioned, which is tying it to a particular user or a particular time frame, primarily based on the considerable investments that have been made by the applicants in establishing those conditional use permits. But another component that we deal with is to avoid any perception of treating individual applicants with a similar use differently. So again, we have a broad range of ability to do things, but how we've applied it in the past has been appropriate, if you will, and somewhat well received. So generally, another thing that we would think of is that the conditional use permits that we evaluate, the fewer conditions, the better. And if we can recognize that as we continue to work with the applicants to craft those conditions, to keep it as simple as possible, that would be the desired way to go about it for everybody. And overall, Frederick County's approach to reviewing conditional use permits appears to have been relatively well received, and to this point has served both the county and the applicants looking for a conditional use permit relatively well. So I wanted to kind of go over that and kind of reinforce some of the things that we had discussed, points that were made, and put it in the context of these are practices, and perhaps these are best practices that we have been doing or we could consider to do here in Frederick County. Yes, sir.
Do we have any conditional use permits now on the books that do not run with land that are specific to a user? Or has everything to date been specific to the property?
There are old ones that were done years and years ago that run specific with a property owner. However, a determination was made a long, long time ago that while that property owner changed, in certain cases, the use could continue. So there's some historical context to that. And quite frankly, many of those don't even exist anymore. There's so many of them that were that old just on around.
I could add, Roger, I'm actually helping one person right now where it was a public garage tied to an applicant, and he's gonna have to come back before us this summer and get it tied to the land instead.
Right.
Well, I guess what strikes me, when we do a conditional use permit for something where there is a fair amount of capital investment, we're essentially rezoning the land. Then if we have the conditional use permit run with the land, we are essentially rezoning the land for one specific use. And the one that really still kind of bothers me that we did on Route 50 West, when we put that, what was it, a 7-Eleven or a gas station, or I even forget what it was now.
Bank.
Or the Hardee's or something there. That should have been a rezoning. And I guess I'm a little bothered when we have somebody that does put a fair amount of capital investment in there, and we let them do it through a conditional use permit and not a rezoning, when a rezoning would be the proper way to do it. And, a garage, that's a fair investment, not a whole lot. Certainly a nail salon, that's not something that, but if we're building a whole restaurant or building a gas station and doing it through a conditional use permit, is that the way we should be doing it, or should we be doing it as a rezoning? And should we discourage people from major capital investments? Because we are rezoning the property. If it runs with the land, it runs with the land forever then.
I think, and feel free to jump in if we need to, Rod, but it gets back to the identified uses, the permitted uses in certain districts, and those conditional use permits. So it's in how we set it up, how the county has historically done that. That's really where that evaluation comes on in. And if the uses are consistently heavy commercial in nature and would warrant that, then we have to evaluate those uses that we include, and if it's appropriate in the rural area district, just as the example. So you would encourage them to go one way or another by modifying your list if you feel it's appropriate. And that would be based upon presumably examples that may not consistently fit in with a particular location or area.
Okay.
Other thoughts? To me, Mike, let's say that the applicant that we just been speaking with decides that business is not for her, and then she decides that she wants to put the house on the market. Is it more helpful to that person to have a CUP attendant to that house in terms of market attractiveness or not? I think what I heard in that meeting was that we have more flexibility than we think we've had. And perhaps we ought to just, I keep thinking about her.
And in that example, it may well make the property ultimately more marketable if they can see that there has been a conversion of a certain portion and a very nice facility down there in which somebody can move in and do the very same thing.
Or not.
Certainly.
So the choice would be there.
Yeah.
If they had a garage set up where they were doing auto repair or something like that, I think that would make the property a lot more valuable, marketable.
Right. Right. Any other thoughts? Is this helpful? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good guideline to go by. When you're saying it's that house more marketable, is it also go the other way for the houses beside of it to
Yeah.
make them less marketable?
Yeah, exactly. And
Someone
it,
knows that can move out and someone else can move in. Somebody said, oh, I don't want that house because, there's a possibility of another business going in there or something like that, because I could see that possibly going the other way also.
I would say if our conditions are effective, that should mitigate any of those impacts, you'd hope.
Yeah.
That if they were well done and, and the folks abided by them.
Right.
That would resolve that, yeah.
Probably 20 years from now, people will forget there's even a CUP there unless someone comes down and does some investigation. Exactly. Since we don't record these.
Unless there's 5 cars parked on the street all the time.
Well, yeah, I mean, the second or third owner of that house in the future may not even be aware of it.
We don't record these.
No. We
They're not
started
on
to
the
with
deed.
rezonings several years ago. That's very helpful.
Obviously, they're on file in the county's planning office, but they're not recorded in the courthouse as we do with proffers to ensure that anybody who has a future interest in the property is fully aware of what the uses would be.
We may want to start doing that for title searches and that type of thing. Just throwing it out there.
If it goes with the land, we should be putting it on a deed, recording it with the deed.
So that's a good point. Might be very helpful.
Well,
Thank you.
more to talk about anytime we want to.
Absolutely, yeah. So, as we move from the conditional use permits, obviously, we had a fair amount of other discussion and at the retreat, and dealing with a variety of different things. The open discussion amongst the planning commissioners with the board, I thought, was very helpful, and thank you for facilitating that and making it move along as it did. Mr. Foote, of course, is always welcome and entertaining, but I think the value in what we talked about helped us with our conditional use permits discussion, rezonings, or kind of all of the above. But it got very interesting, of course, when we talked about the profit legislation that was passed and how that would affect communities. And he did that so from his perspective very clearly. He was involved with that, the creation of that, but from his perspective as an individual representing private development interests. So I thought that was very, very helpful. To note that we will be talking about that more, as we mentioned at the retreat, because it's a very important issue that deals with a variety of things associated with rezoning requests that you may see in the future. And those rezoning requests, of course, being residential rezoning requests and mixed-use projects that include residential components. So that will be something that we'll get into again as the next few months pass. Mr. Bishop gave a lengthy overview of the transportation projects that are occurring that we're involved with, and House Bill 2, second round of that will be upon us. And I know Mr. Bishop will be back in front of the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors within the next month or so with the annual update of our primary, secondary road improvement plan. So that will be in front of you again. And then we, of course, transitioned into just recognizing the state of the county and where the county was heading, perhaps, as far as the continued growth of the community. Ms. Garden gave a brief introduction presentation from her part and her perspective as the county administrator, and that led into our discussion on the comprehensive plan update. And as Mr. Rhodes Marston talked about here this evening, we have already scheduled the public meetings. We want tomorrow night up in the Gainsborough Elementary School, and Mr. Kenny will be there, and hopefully many others will be there too. But we have 4 around the county. The second one's down in the Kernstown area, the Mid-Atlantic Farm Credit. Then we'll be at Greenwood Elementary School, and then following that we'll be up at the Stonewall Elementary School. As was mentioned, all of the information that was updated with the different edits and involvement is available online, and hopefully anybody who is interested can also get online and review the information, but more importantly, provide us feedback as to any concerns or any questions that they may have. So we look forward to those public meetings over the next couple of weeks, to the Planning Commission's participation, and then as we conclude those public meetings, getting it back in front of the Commission and Board of Supervisors later in the summer. So that's my overview of the retreat, and if there's anything else that we missed or that you want us to be aware of, we'll be happy to consider that. Yes.
One thing that I take away from Mr. Foote, he always comes up with gems when you have a discussion with him, but one of the major takeaways that kind of stuck in my mind was that we need to make sure the staff needs to keep us on track and make sure that if we vote against or recommend disapproval of a rezoning or anything, that we have given the staff enough substance for you to write up a good narrative that goes to the board on why we voted to deny it, so that it will stand up in court if it goes to court. And I think, sometimes we may have denied some things that we didn't give a very good explanation, and we kind of left it up to the staff to read our minds and come up with a narrative. But I think you guys need to, and ladies, need to keep us straight and make sure that if we haven't given you a good narrative and tied it to either a comprehensive plan or something substantial, that you kind of let us know it and say, no, you've got to give us a little more substance on why you're voting to deny this. Because we don't want to kind of let the board hanging out there without good justification from us on why we're denying something. And we need to really make sure that, that we express our thoughts on why we are denying it. So there's no doubt, and it will stand the legal test.
Yeah, very good point. And that also goes to our staff report and the information that's presented in that it will be as thorough as it possibly can be to give you all the information you need to make that decision, and also the argument for or against the decision you make.
But I think also that we have to verbalize. We have to verbalize during the meeting. It can go through your head, well, gee whiz, because of so-and-so. If I don't say it or you don't say it, then it doesn't become part of the record, and I think that's important.
Very much so.
I think there might be times, though, that if we narrow in on, say, this one particular item doesn't meet the comprehensive plan, and it does go to court, then the county's position is to defend that one particular item. Whereas if we just broadly say it does not meet the comprehensive plan, then that gives Mr. Williams the full range of everything in the comp plan to argue about. It makes it a lot tougher for the person suing us to overcome that.
Well, I think we need to do a better job of vocalizing, it doesn't meet the comprehensive plan, what else? It's not safe, or it's, we need to give as much justification as we can.
I agree on the discussion part, but I think when we actually make the motion, it should just be a clean, it does not meet the comprehensive plan, and leave it right at that, and not pull out any particular details of the comprehensive plan.
But if we have it in the discussion, at least there's more there to go by.
Something I'd like to see, Mike, in the future on especially the residential rezonings, now that we have all the data of how many lots are available, where they're at in the system, so whenever rezoning comes before us and say it's 400 lots, staff could say, well, we currently have 15,000 on the books. Here's how many we could serve with sewer and water right now. Here's how many has roads. Are we prepared at this time to add an additional 400 to the inventory in this area? Just kind of to get us in the mindset of, do we need this right now, or is this the appropriate time or not?
It's a good comment, and perhaps the whole planning area study is too much. Perhaps the whole planning area study is too much, but if we focus on one of the area plans where we've got that information, then that would be perhaps more useful.
Yeah.
So we have the big picture and then a more related picture to the particular application.
And it could be helpful in the commercial and industrial too, just to show how much industrial is in the area or how little is in the area and how much it's needed. As far as being vacant and actually usable.
I agree with you on that, especially on the commercial. It's very helpful. We can see something like that. We don't know how much M1 land still available or B2, what have you, when we start doing those transitions around and what have you. I think it would be very helpful for that.
Yeah. It's a good takeaway. We can certainly incorporate those into future rezoning reports.
Anything else? Thank you, Mike, and thank you all for the conversation. It helps. I do think that we will be back here in 2 weeks. Is that correct, Mr. Ruddy?
Yes.
On the 15th? Yes, so I guess we're ready to adjourn.
Move for adjournment.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you all. Thank you very much.